Happy Monday to you fellas. I need to stop highlighting the day in my videos because if you notice, I did 2 videos recently where I identified what day I recorded the video on, but I ended up uploading it the next day. Like I did a video where at the beginning of the video I say happy Thursday, but I didn't upload the video until Friday. And I think there was another video a couple weeks ago where I said happy Tuesday, but I didn't end up uploading the video until Wednesday. So that happens occasionally. Sometimes I'd say 96, 97% of the time I upload videos the same day I record it. But I'd say at least 3 to 4% of the time I will upload a video the day after. I think in at least one case it wasn't until 2 or 3 days after I recorded the video. Like I remember one time I recorded a video on a Friday and I didn't upload it until that following Monday. So anyway, now I know looking at the title of this video, there's at least a small percentage of you all that are like, oh no, not this discussion again. Not this discussion again. Because see, here's the deal. Before I came to YouTube, the only real debates I used to have before I got to YouTube was the debates that in some way, shape, or fashion centered around the pros and cons of direct verbal game versus the pros and cons of indirect verbal game. That was the main, if I engaged in a debate with guys, 99% of the time, that's what the debate was about. The benefits versus detriments of direct verbal game versus the benefits and detriments of indirect verbal game. But since I came to YouTube, starting with probably my 2nd or 3rd month on YouTube, I came to YouTube at the beginning of April of 2017. Since I've been on YouTube, there's been a number of debates related to connecting with women. Connecting with women in general, and particularly for short-term, non-monogamous casual sex. Basically, and I've always said, when it comes to connecting with women, particularly connecting with women for the purpose of engaging in a few episodes of short-term, non-monogamous casual sex, as opposed to, say, long-term monogamous sex or long-term non-monogamous sex, otherwise known as polyamory, or short-term, strictly monogamous sex, known as serial monogamy. I've always said there's 5 general ways of getting a woman in bed. When you examine all the various philosophies, techniques for getting women in bed for casual sex, it basically comes down, every method is going to fall under one or more of these 5 categories. One or more of these 5 categories. And that would be attraction, verbal persuasion and verbal seduction, dishonesty and disingenuous and misleading behavior, otherwise known as manipulation, monetary compensation / financial negotiation, and physical force, or at minimum, the use of drugs and or alcohol. Physical force and or the use of drugs and alcohol, which I simply, for simple terms, call that coercion. Coercion. So those are the 5 general methods of getting women in bed, particularly for casual sex. So, again, before I came to YouTube, most of the people I had debates with were guys who favored dishonesty and disingenuous and misleading behavior. Manipulation, basically. You call that just simply manipulation. Guys who dishonesty and manipulation. And verbal persuasion. See, that when it comes to verbal game, you can put verbal game into two categories. One is simply direct versus indirect. And then secondly, you could say there's honest and persuasively charming verbal game, which I generally refer to simply as seduction, verbal seduction. Honesty, verbal seduction, at least my brand of verbal seduction, is representative of any time you use honest and persuasively charming verbal game with a woman. Upfront, straightforwardly honest, and persuasively charming verbal game with a woman. That's seduction. Manipulation also is a form of verbal game, but it involves being dishonest to one degree or another, being disingenuous and misleading to one degree or another, and being emotionally manipulative. I simply call that manipulation. So again, before I came to YouTube, most of the guys I had debates with were guys from the manipulation faction. But since I came to YouTube, you got guys who support the looks-only faction, which of course would be attraction. You got guys who are into being a trick or sugar daddy, which would be the monetary compensation and financial negotiation faction. And even a handful of guys that support either physical force or at minimum the use of drugs and alcohol, which would be the coercion faction. You got guys on YouTube, and really in the manosphere in general, and even in the black manosphere in general, you have guys that are proponents of each one of those 5 individual factions. And with me, here's what's interesting with me, man. A lot of my followers and supporters have heard me use this lighthearted term I call accomplicism. Complicism, which simply means a blend of a compliment and a criticism. There's some people who tend to give me compliments, some people who tend to express criticisms and insults my way, and then there's some people that are kind of in the middle. They tend to express a number of complicisms. Again, which is a blend of a compliment and a criticism. And probably the most foremost complicism I've received from guys since I've been on YouTube, mainly from black guys, but even a few non-black guys, is guys will say, Alan Currie has not connected with a high number of women in his life because of his verbal seduction skills, i.e. his mouthpiece or his Mode 1 philosophy. That's bullshit. That's the criticism part. They'll say Alan Currie hasn't connected with a lot of women because of his, verbal seduction skills, his persuasive charm, his conversation skills, his overall mouthpiece, or his, Mode 1 approach philosophy. Again, that's the criticism part. Here comes the compliment part. They'll say, Alan Currie, he pulled a lot of women because he's just a really good-looking dude. He's just a really good-looking dude. Which, in a weird way, is flattering that guys will say that. It's like they're simultaneously complimenting my looks. Well, you could say they're complimenting my looks, but criticizing the impact of my mouthpiece. There's a number, I'm talking about probably hundreds of guys in the manosphere in general, and particularly the black manosphere, that have done that with me. That most recently it happened, I think it was last Thursday. Yeah, this past Thursday was the most recent time I was I briefly jumped on, there's some couple people I tend to jump on their panels from time to time when they're doing a live stream. And one of those guys is a black male YouTuber named Bernard Riley. Now, there was a period I wasn't jumping on his panels for a while, early this year, like from starting with mid to late February up until a couple months ago. I wasn't jumping on none of his panels. But anyway, I recently jumped on a panel. I think it was last Thursday. And there was this older brother on the panel. It ain't too many people in the Black Manosphere older than me, with the exception of guys like BGS Ibmore and maybe one or two others, because I'm 58. So for anybody to be older than me, they got to be 59 or older. But I think this guy's in his early to mid 60s. And here's the comment he made. This is how our little debate got started. He was talking about he was talking about the difference between men's motivation for pursuing women sexually versus women's motivation for pursuing men sexually. So that was a starting point. And he tried to distinguish. He basically, and I'm going to be slightly paraphrasing some of his words, but essentially this is what he said. He said, men and women pursue each other, have different motivations for pursuing each other sexually. He said with men, our motivation for pursuing women sexually is simply because of like our biological impulses, our raw, lustful desires, and our animalistic nature. So if we see a woman that we consider beautiful and sexy, just the animalistic, lustful, animalistic nature inside of us will provoke us to want to pursue a woman to have sex with her. Now let's pause right there. I don't really disagree with that. For the most part, I don't disagree with that. Wow, we do. Men do have strong, lustful desires and biological impulses to want to have sex with women. So on that part of his assertion or argument, I didn't have any disagreement. Where I had a disagreement was on the female side. In contrast, he said women, and again, I'm paraphrasing all his words. These weren't exactly his words verbatim, but essentially this is what he said. He said, on the other hand, women are different. He said women pursue men sexually in order to get something out of them, such as their desire to exploit that man for his, financial resources and material possessions, to take advantage of his degree of social status, and I don't know, just favors. And that's when I began to disagree with him. I said, wait a minute, let me clarify this. So you saying that men pursue women sexually based on just animalistic, lustful desires, but when it comes to women, you saying they all have like a manipulative, materialistic, or opportunistic desire for men, but no lustful desire. And then at times he would contradict himself. At times he would say, well, no, that's not necessarily what I'm saying. He said, at one point he said, no, I think women can gravitate towards men because of lust too, but I think women primarily only hook up with men for sex to get something out of those men. Again, such as access to their financial and materialistic resources because of their social status. And then that kind of segued into a greater argument where another black male YouTube content creator said, Alan, what I don't think you're understanding is he's basically saying, I said, you're telling me that women never pursue men simply because of their looks, combination of their looks and their masculine sex appeal? Is that what you're telling me? And then another black male YouTube content interjected. He said, well, those things, you could consider that a subcategory of status. So in that sense, I understand what this older brother is saying, because you could consider that a status, and then, yeah, that's kind of where the debate went from there because I was like, I don't consider a man's looks or masculine sex appeal a part of status. That's bullshit. And we just ended it by, respectfully agreeing to disagree. Yeah, so it was me versus two guys. Two black male YouTube content creators. Their argument was, when women are sexually aggressive with men, they have some type of hidden motives or underlying agenda attached to it. They have some type of hidden motives or underlying agenda attached to it. Whereas men, we just give in to our animalistic nature. Insert dog face here. See, I mentioned earlier in this video that I've been on YouTube since April 2017. If you go way back in my archives, like the spring, early summer of 2017, I did at least 2 videos related to this debate. I said, essentially, that I find that when a man is a combination of beta and blue pill, he tends to think that women have totally different motivations for sex than men do. I find that to be true in almost every instance. Anytime a guy's a combination of blue pill and beta, he's going to make the assumption that women's motivation to engage in sex with a man is totally different than a man's motivation to engage in sex with a woman. In other words, more specifically, a lot of guys who are either blue pill, beta, or both, they tend to believe that women, like this guy was saying, only engage in sex, and particularly casual sex with a guy, if they're getting something out of it beyond sexual enjoyment and sexual satisfaction. They don't believe that women ever have sex with guys strictly for the sake of sexual enjoyment and sexual satisfaction. They believe that with women, it has to be something like money, status, and then again, the secondary argument was that looks and masculine sex appeal is actually a subcategory of status. Like one black male content creator, he said, Alan, come on. Be real. You know a lot of the women who had sex with you because they wanted to brag to their girlfriends that they had sex with a guy as good looking as you and as sexy as you. You know that. It didn't have nothing to do with, just their lustful desires. They wanted to brag to their girlfriends. I'm just convinced, man, some guys will never get it. You could drop all kinds of red pill knowledge, wisdom, and insight on them. Some guys just gonna never get it, man. They're gonna never get it, man. This is really that fucking simple, man. Some guys, I don't care how many videos you do, how many books you put out trying to enlighten certain guys on what's really up. They ain't gonna get it. They're gonna stick to their own narrow-minded beliefs and attitudes and opinions, and they're never gonna think outside the box. But the reality is this, man. A lot of women, point number one, a lot of women I've fucked in my life casually, it was because those women lusted after me. It wasn't because they was trying to get something out of me in the way of money or materialistic possessions or because I had, some high degree of social status. They wanted me to fuck them because I got their pussy dripping wet. I don't know how much blunt I can be. I left their pussy dripping wet. Something I know how to do that a lot of guys don't know how to do. I did a video, I think, early this year or late last year where I said most men, they don't have the verbal seduction skills and erotic dirty skills to leave a woman's pussy dripping wet without touching them in some kind of way. I know how to just talk to a woman and leave her pussy dripping wet without laying one finger on her. That's why I've had hundreds of women pay me for phone sex. For at least a 6-year period, I used to be, and anybody who owns my book who said again knows this, I used to be essentially what I refer to as a phone sex gigolo. Women would pay me for me to phone fuck them. Pay me money. Many times, hundreds of dollars. I would say at minimum, I probably made at least $20,000, $25,000, if not more, in my life off of women paying me for phone sex. Drops mic. So if you've never used your voice, the combination of your voice and your conversation skills and verbal seduction skills to leave a woman's pussy wet, you ain't gonna be able to relate to that. You ain't gonna be able to relate to that. It's just like, if you ain't never had the height or vertical leap ability to dunk a basketball, you ain't gonna be able to relate to those guys who can very easily. I used to be able to dunk a basketball at the beginning of my senior year in high school because I had a high vertical leap. I just had no handles, no dribbling skills. That's why I didn't make the varsity basketball team my senior year. But I had what's known informally as hops. Some of y'all, man, I can tell listening to a lot of guys in the comments they make, they've never verbally seduced a woman. They might have had sex with women. I did a video earlier this year where I said, man, just because you've had sex with a woman then doesn't necessarily mean you seduced that woman. See, I've heard some guys, they think anytime they got a woman in bed, that automatically means that they seduced them. No, it don't. And that goes back to those 5 categories. Let's start with attraction. What is attraction? Before I get to that, I had some guy, after that live stream with Bernard, he said in the comment section, he said, I can't believe it took ARC until he's damn near 60 to realize that just about all the pussy he got was because of his model good looks, which again is a compliment that he said. I actually used to be a prep model in my 20s. I used to do some prep modeling in my 20s. So that was the complimentary end. He complimented me on my looks. But he said, I can't believe it took Alan Roger Currie till he's damn near 60 to realize that just about all the pussy he's gotten has been because of his model good looks instead of what he thinks has been his mouthpiece or his Mode 1 philosophy. And that's where the criticism. So again, I call that accomplicism. Somebody simultaneously compliments me and critic. He complimented my looks, which a lot of black men in the manosphere have, but he criticized the effectiveness of my mouthpiece. He basically, in so many words, said, Alan Roger Currie's mouthpiece is irrelevant. His Mode 1 philosophy and his mouthpiece is irrelevant. That's simply not true. Who do you notice who never says my mouthpiece is irrelevant? You got all these guys in the manosphere, black manosphere, and particularly here on YouTube that tend to say my mouthpiece is irrelevant. Who noticeably does not say that Alan Roger Currie's mouthpiece is irrelevant? Women. You ain't never heard no women do no video saying ARC's mouthpiece is bullshit or ARC's mouthpiece is irrelevant. If you have, send me the link. I want you to send me the link. Send me a link of a woman saying ARC's mouthpiece don't mean shit. I invite you to. Send me a link to a video where a woman, a good-looking, sexy woman, is saying that, not only in respect to me specifically, but just in general, saying that mouthpiece don't mean shit. I would almost bet you ain't gonna hardly ever hear no women saying that shit. You ain't gonna hardly ever hear no women saying that. Matter of fact, I'm gonna tell a quick story, and this story is included in my book, Who Said Again. My own late great mother, my mother, who I showed a picture of in a recent video, My mother, we were having a discussion a few years before she passed away. Here's the interesting story. It started with, see, my mother was old school, as most people in the generation. And when it came to modern technology, this was around the time when voicemail technology was just starting to be used. But a lot of people, particularly older people, didn't really use voicemail on their landline phone. They used was known as an answer machine. When I first left Los Angeles to come back to the Midwest to help look after my mother and father, my mother had a traditional answering machine. And so one time, these two women who I used to mess around with in Los Angeles, one I had both physical sex and phone sex with, and the other woman I just had exclusively phone sex with, but we never ended up fucking. They left a message on my mom's answer machine. Now, one of the two women should have known better because I had specifically told her that I had moved back to the Midwest and I was living with my mom. The other one, she assumed I was living by myself. Anyway, they left these really triple X-rated messages on the messages. So I had been out running errands and I came home and my mother was just giving me a look. She just gave me this look and I said, Mom, what's up? Why are you giving me that look? And she just went like this with her finger, like pointing at the answer machine. So I went and pressed play on the answer machine, and sure enough, these two women left these really, triple X-rated medley. Oh, Alan, I miss you. Oh, I want your dick in my pussy, and oh, I want you to phone fuck me and make me come, and all this type of stuff. And so, of course, I was a little embarrassed that my mother had to hear that. So I thought she was gonna, I don't know, admonish me to one degree or another or something like that. So she said, so, my son knows how to talk that talk. That's what she told me, that women in her generation, that's what they called having a mouthpiece, particularly a very sexually provocative, sexually explicit, ultra seductive mouthpiece. She said women in her generation would refer to that as being able to talk that talk. So she said, so my son knows how to talk that talk. And I nodded my head like, yes, indeed. And then she went on to lightheartedly admonish me. She said, well, how come you haven't used that talk talents to get me a grandson or a granddaughter? And I did feel bad about that. On a quick side note, that's one of the things my mother wanted very badly before she died. And I feel bad I wasn't able to deliver that for her. But, as you know, I do have a son now. So in spirit, now she does have a grandson. But yeah, she wanted a grandchild. I'd say 99% of the reason why she wanted me to get married when she was alive was so I could give her some grandchildren. Anyway, she went on to tell, we ended up kind of having a brief discussion about it. And I'm looking at my timer. She actually went on to tell me, my mother was an art teacher in the Currie, Indiana Community School Corporation. And one of the schools, she worked on all levels. She worked on elementary school level, middle school level, and high school level. And one of her assignments for one particular year was she was what was known as a permanent substitute at this school called Westside High School. If anybody's from Indiana, they know Westside High School. Westside High School at one point was in the top 2 or 3 largest high schools in the state of Indiana. It was definitely the largest high school in Currie, Indiana. Athletically, they were known for track and field. There was a period where either Westside or another high school called Roosevelt used to dominate track and field almost every year. Every year it would either be Westside that would take state in track and field, or it'd be Roosevelt that took state in track and field. So my mom said one time she had this really beautiful girl that was one of her students that was in the honor society. She was a scholar. She's really intelligent. Physically, she said she was just beautiful. And she was dating this guy that my mom felt was, you could almost say, below her league. She didn't actually use those words, but she just felt like this girl could have done better. And so one day she said they were talking about something to do with a class project, and my mother kind of got nosy and asked her, like, let's call her student Brenda. And let's call the guy she was messing around with Leon. She said, Brenda, I'm just curious. She said, what made you choose Leon as your boyfriend? Because my mother said Leon was a guy who looks-wise wasn't that attractive. He's probably, at best, he was average looking. He wasn't any type of academic scholar. And he wasn't any type of varsity athlete. And so my mother, she was like, basically like, why are you dating this guy? She said, I've seen a lot of guys, trying to get with you and go out with you and whatnot. Guys who were star basketball players, star football players, the top scholars in the school. Like, what made you choose this guy? And she said, Brenda was like, well, Miss Currie, it's hard to put in words. She just said he has a certain charm and charisma about him. That's kind of the best way I could put it. He has a certain charm and charisma. And my mother, being no dummy, she's a woman who knows her stuff. She ended up saying, she said, so in other words, he knows how to talk that talk in your ear. And so in my mother's way of saying it was like her basically saying he knows how to talk dirty to you. And she said, Brenda started blushing and nodded her head like blushingly like, yeah, she's like, Mrs. Currie, you get me. You get me. You know what I was trying to say. And my mother was like, oh, yeah, I know what you said. And she said, Brenda went on to say, that was like, I wouldn't say that was the only reason she was with the guy, but she said that was one of the integral reasons why she was with this particular guy. Because he knew how to talk that talk. So for all those guys who say Mouthpiece is not important, you need to pay attention to that story. You need to pay attention to that story. Because this woman ended up telling my mother that was the main reason why she chose this guy. Because she said a lot of guys who were more handsome than this guy, or more intelligent than this guy, or more of a popular athlete than this guy, they didn't know how to talk that talk like this brother did. They didn't know how to talk that talk. I know how to talk that talk. I've gotten paid by women for knowing how to talk that talk. That's when you know you're a bad motherfucker. It's not just when you know how to talk that talk, but when you've had women pay you money because you're so good at knowing how to talk that talk. If you want evidence, the biggest evidence, of course, is go listen to my adults-only podcast program called The Erotic Conversationalist. That's probably my number one evidence on the internet of me being able to talk that talk, is my show, The Erotic Conversationalist. But anyway, what I was going to say 5 minutes ago, or 10 minutes ago, is that I'm going to go down, and I've already done this on a couple previous videos, but I'm going to go down how you can tell which method will benefit you the most. Which method, again, there's 5 general methods of connecting with women sexually. And I'll say more specifically for short-term non-monogamous casual sex. Let's start with attraction. Attraction is when you're able to get a woman, motivate a woman to have sex with you just based on a combination of your level of physical attractiveness, your physical appearance. I would say next to your physical appearance and physical attractiveness, your demeanor and disposition, which would kind of contribute. That's one of the things that contributes to your masculine sex appeal, your demeanor and disposition. And just everything about you that's more physical than verbal. That's more physical than verbal. I've always highlighted probably the number one year in my life When I would say I got a lot of women in bed just almost strictly on my looks and my demeanor and disposition, was my senior year in high school. My senior in high school, I didn't really have no verbal game. The women I had sex with, they just considered me a fine motherfucker. And I know that makes me sound conceited, but that was their words, not mine. Matter of fact, most of the women, if not all of the women I had sex with my senior in high school, I didn't even make the first move. The women, I'd say probably 95% of women I slept with my senior in high school, they made the first move on me. I didn't make the first move on them. That's what I call mode zero. If you watched a few of my videos, I call that mode zero. Yeah, most of the women, they made the first move on me. I would like go to a party or go to a sporting event or some other social function, and women literally would just come up to me and they'd be like, damn, you fine. Here's my number. Give me a call. My parents ain't going to be at home this weekend or something of that nature. Yeah, so here's the one time you know you getting pussy primarily, if not exclusively, just based on your looks and everything about you physically, is when, number one, you ain't got to offer to take no woman out to dinner to have sex with them. You ain't got to spend no money on no woman to have sex with them. And you really ain't got to use no verbal game to have sex with them. You really ain't got to talk to them much at all. You ain't got to give them no alcohol. You ain't got to give them no drugs. All you got to do is just be a good-looking motherfucker. Dress appropriately, eat right, stay in the gym, working out, keep your physique in shape, keep your grooming, your hair and your facial hair, and just everything about your physical presentation. Stay on top of it. And you're going to have at least a certain percentage of women that's just going to give you pussy just based on that. Just based on just your looks alone. If I had to estimate in my life as a whole, I'd say probably roughly, if I had to give a rough estimate with me, I would say probably roughly 15% of the women in my life have, starting with high school up into my 50s, have given me pussy just based on looks alone, without anything else. Just looks alone. I'd say about roughly 15% of women I've had sex with have given me pussy just looks alone. What's the downside of looks and attraction, if there's any? If there's at least one downside to depending on your looks and physical presentation alone, is you're not going to get a lot of what I refer to as wholesome pretender or erotic hypocrite types in bed. You're not going to get those type of women in bed. You'll get a lot of reciprocators in bed. Women who are reciprocators, you'll get reciprocators in bed. But when it comes to wholesome pretenders and erotic hypocrites, yeah, you're not going to get those women in bed on just looks alone. Nope. Looks alone, I did a video about that last year. Looks alone will never help you get women that are wholesome pretenders or erotic hypocrites in bed. They will only help you with women who are reciprocators. Now, speaking of wholesome pretenders and erotic hypocrites, that moves me to the second category of connecting with women for sex, and more specifically casual sex. And that would be verbal persuasion and verbal seduction. And plain and simply, if you want to get wholesome pretenders and erotic hypocrites in bed, you got to have a mouthpiece. It's really just that simple. You have to have a mouthpiece. It's not an option, it's a requirement. If you want to get a high number of women who are wholesome pretender types and or erotic hypocrite types in bed, you have to have a mouthpiece. You have to be very confident, very alpha, very persuasively charming, and seductive. You have to be. Your verbal seduction skills and erotic dirty talk skills have to be at minimum above average and at maximum exceptional. Again, that's the only way you're going to get wholesome pretenders and erotic hypocrites in bed. Because see, the main issue, the main obstacle you got to overcome with wholesome pretenders and erotic hypocrites, and I talk about this in detail in my book, Ooh Said Again, but just without going into too much detail, see, those two types of women, you're dealing with a combination of two things. At least one thing, and in some cases two. With a wholesome pretender, the main obstacle you're dealing with is those women are afraid of being slut-shamed. That's why they're going to be resistant to any proposition for casual sex, unlike, say, a reciprocator. A wholesome pretender is a woman that, on the positive end, she might find you to be physically attractive and sexually appealing, but on the negative end, her social programming and good girl cultural conditioning is going to cause her to say, no, I don't want to engage in casual sex. If we're able to have a relationship, I'll go ahead and have sex with you, but I'm not going to engage in casual sex. It's mainly, again, because she doesn't want to be slut-shamed. So when a wholesome pretender, if nothing else, it's just the fear of being slut-shamed is going to hold her back from engaging in casual sex with a guy. With erotic hypocrite, it's a combination of two things. It's also the fear of being slut-shamed, and secondly, erotic hypocrites are competitive. They are very egotistically competitive. Their attitude basically is, I ain't gonna let you get this pussy for free. In a nutshell, that's the erotic hypocrite attitude. Their attitude is, I ain't gonna let you get this pussy for free. You gonna have to do some of this. You gonna have to spend some money on me. You either gonna have to be in a relationship with me to get the pussy, or if you strictly want casual sex, you're gonna have to give up the cheese. You're gonna have to give up the cheddar, which is, of course, what leads a lot of guys to resort to tricking, being a trick and or a sugar daddy. That's the erotic hypocrite. They don't ever, an erotic hypocrite is a woman, even if she's attracted to you, she doesn't ever want to give you the pussy for free. She considers that taking an L. Erotic hypocrites consider giving a man the pussy for free as taking an L, unless you're a bad motherfucker like me. And I'm being real. The only way you're going to have casual sex with a woman who's an erotic hypocrite without spending money on them, without being in a relationship with them, or without spending money on them, is if you got A+ grade verbal seduction skills and erotic dirty talk skills. That's the only way you're going to get an erotic hypocrite in bed, without spending money on them. Now, without spending money on them or without spending time with them non-sexually, that's the only way you're going to get an erotic hypocrite in bed, is if you got A+ verbal seduction skills and erotic dirty talk skills. Now, third category, dishonesty and disingenuous and misleading behavior, i.e., emotional manipulation. See, the number one guys who resort to manipulation is guys that typically don't have the looks to get a woman to agree to have casual sex with them. So they're not up to par in the just look/attraction department, and they don't have the persuasively charming and seductive mouthpiece to get women to have casual sex with them. So here's where I got to bring up Alpha Male Strategies. As most people know, before Alpha Male Strategies started marketing himself as a dating coach, he used to actually be in my comment section quite a bit. I'd say he was in my comment section at least a half a dozen to a dozen times in fall of 2017. Between roughly August and mid to late November of 2017, Alpha Male Strategies used to be a regular, or at least a semi-regular person in my comment section. And I remember one of the very first times, if not the very first time, that me and him had a disagreement on one of my videos was I did a video where I was basically saying what I always say, that I don't believe in taking women out on dates in order to score casual sex. I don't believe in spending money on women for the sake of casual sex, like whining and dining them, taking them out on lunch dates, dinner dates, movie dates, that type of thing. And secondly, just I don't believe in really spending time, a significant amount of time with women non-sexually, period, before I fuck a woman casually. And which of course is related to my book, No Free Attention. That's where my philosophy of no free attention comes into play. And Alvin Australia is one of the first people in my comment section to argue with me. And I'm going to be slightly paraphrasing his words, but this is what he said after one of my videos. He said, Alan, I would have to disagree with you, man. He said, I would have to disagree with you. He said, see, you can probably get away with hooking up with women casually without spending no money on them, taking women out on dates, or spending time with them non-sexually, because women consider you like a pretty boy type guy, a really good-looking guy. And you, based on what I've heard, you got a top-notch mouthpiece. But he said, if you're a guy that's average to less than average looking, and you ain't really got no mouthpiece, he was like, that shit ain't gonna work. That shit ain't gonna work. And matter of fact, if you listen to his videos beginning with January of 2018, and you read his 2 dating advice books, not only does he double down, I would say he triple downs on that assertion. He says that like in his 2nd dating advice book. He has a chapter 65 where he criticizes my Mode 1 approach. He simply calls it the direct approach. And that's one of the things he says in his book. He says basically the same disagreement he had with me in my comment section is the same thing he says in his book, which is that he basically says in so many words that the only way you're going to get away with benefiting from direct verbal game is if you're really good looking and if you have a top-notch, ultra-seductive mouthpiece. But he basically goes on to say, if you're a guy who's average to less than average looking and you don't have no type of persuasively charming, seductive mouthpiece, then you're going to have to rely on indirect verbal game and at least a bit of whining and dining in order to pull women, in order to get women in bed. But yeah, that was the argument he had with me. He was like, dude, you're more one thing and you're not going on date philosophy. That ain't going to work for guys that are average or less than average looking and guys who ain't got no mouthpiece. He's like, that ain't going to work. That ain't going to work. Them guys ain't going to never get laid if they take your advice. And as you can see by the large following he has, there's a lot of guys in the manosphere that agree with him on that. But yeah, that's the number one guys who tend to resort to indirect verbal game, otherwise known as emotional manipulation. Yeah, the combination of, again, dishonest behavior, disingenuous and misleading behavior, and just being emotionally manipulative. See, what guys in that category do is, instead of trying to change a woman's attitude towards casual sex, they instead just mislead women into believing that they are open to being in a long-term relationship with the woman until they get the pussy. And then once they get the pussy, they just go ghost on the woman. That's the simple basis of indirect verbal game, is give a woman the vague and ambiguous impression that you're open to being her next long-term boyfriend or future husband, which would be mode 2, or even more so, just blatantly lie to the woman and tell her that you want to be her next long-term boyfriend or future husband, which would fall under mode 3. Both mode 2 and mode 3 are representative of indirect verbal game. And yeah, that's mainly for guys who feel like, again, that they don't have the looks to get women to have casual sex with them, and men who don't feel like they have any type of charismatic, persuasively charming, or ultra-seductive mouthpiece. Those are the guys who are going to lean towards indirect verbal game. The 4th type of method for getting women in bed is financial negotiation / monetary compensation. That would simply be guys who are either tricks for short-term sex, sugar daddies for more long-term sex, or the third category in that category, the third type of guy in that category would be what's known simply as a long-term beta male financial provider. Basically, a long-term beta male financial provider is almost similar to a sugar daddy, only you're usually married to the woman. And when you fall in that subcategory, that means you know pretty much your wife is a materialistic gold digger, and you accept that. It's not like it's unbeknownst to you. You know that 90 to 99% of the reason why your wife is with you is because you're offering to upgrade her lifestyle, pay all her bills, and you know she's a gold digger. That would put you in the category of a long-term beta male finance. So those are the three types of guys that fall under the category of financial negotiation and monetary compensation. For more short-term, casual sex would be simply a trick. For more long-term, non-monogamous sex would be a sugar daddy if you don't really plan on marrying a woman, but you want it to be a long-term sexual companion, a sugar daddy, and then a long-term beta male financial provider. Again, that's when you know that your wife is pretty much a materialistic gold digger, status seeker type woman. Then the fifth category, which is, to me, I always say the most despicable of the five categories, the most despicable is when you resort to one of these two things, either some type of physical force, or drugs and alcohol to score sex from women, and more specifically casual sex. Yeah, when you physically impose yourself on a woman, which would of course fall in the category of rape or date rape and sexual assault, yeah, that would fall in the category of coercion. A more minor form of coercion would be you don't necessarily use physical force, but you give a woman drugs and or alcohol so that she's not in the right state of mind to give you verbal consent. So like, say you invite a woman over your place and you give her some cocaine, have her snort some cocaine, or you get her sloppy drunk, or give her some heroin or some crystal meth, any type of drugs or hard liquor that's going to alter her mental state of mind. Now, of course, I think all you all know, nowadays, that's automatically considered date rape. If you give a woman drugs and or alcohol, and then you proceed to go ahead and have sex with her, the next day or a few days later, she can charge you with date rape. See, like, again, I mentioned this a number of times. See, in the 1960s, 1970s, and for at least the first 2/3 of the 1980s, that wasn't illegal. Believe it or not, that wasn't illegal. Yeah, in the 1960s, 1970s, and the first 2/3 of the 1980s, it wasn't illegal. It was considered unethical, but it wasn't illegal to give a woman drugs and or alcohol before having sex with her for the first time. But starting with the 1990s, I'd say starting with as early as 1988 and no later than 1991, 1992, that became representative of date rape. Yeah, so nowadays, if you haven't had sex with a woman yet, now if you've already had sex with a woman, say 2 or 3 times, you could probably get away with it. But if you haven't had sex with a woman at least one time yet, and you give a woman drugs and her alcohol before you have sex with her for the first time, that woman has the grounds to turn around and charge you with date rape. And her argument could be, I wasn't in the proper state of mind to give full verbal consent, sober verbal consent. So those are the 5 methods of getting a woman in bed. And again, man, for me, a lot of guys keep trying to make the argument, well, Alan, out of those 5, I think you got more women in bed because of the looks attraction category than I do because of the verbal persuasion and verbal seduction category. I think you got more women in bed because of your looks. As, again, one guy recently said your model good looks rather than your persuasively charming and seductive mouthpiece. Well, all I have to say is the women I've had sex with would disagree with you. If they were willing to come forward and allow themselves to be identified, I guarantee you they would vehemently disagree with you. Now, I would say in a lot of cases it was a combination of both. It wasn't exclusively one or exclusively other. I think if somebody was hypothetically to interview all the women I had casual sex with, and they were to be asked, when you agreed to have casual sex with Alan, ARC, was it because of his looks or his mouthpiece? I would say the majority of women would say both. The majority of women would say a combination of both. But if you were to really press them to choose one or the other, I guarantee you that no less than 2/3 to 3/4 of them would say, oh, his mouthpiece. Oh, his mouthpiece. That's where I got the nickname, the King of Verbal Seduction, from a group of women in California. That's why they gave me the title. That, again, for the upteen, that's not a nickname I gave myself. Some women actually gave me that nickname, the King of Verbal Seduction and Kinky Erotic Dirty Talk. Because women for decades have told me that I was at minimum one of the best, if not the best guy they've ever hooked up with when it came to the category of talking dirty to women. I would say on average probably 4 out of every 5 women I've had casual sex with has told me I was their favorite lover when it came to talking dirty. That's right. King of Verbal Seduction. Quit hating on Mouthpiece. Quit hating on Mouthpiece. A lot of guys, not just myself, but I know quite a few guys who have gotten women in bed because of their mouthpiece, or what my mother would call talking that talk. They knew how to talk that talk.
Yes, sir.
Say it again.
Yes, sir.
Who's the king?
Alan, you're the king.
Say it again.
Alan, you're the king. You're dominating me.
Say it again.
Alan, you're dominating me right now. Mode 1.
Mode 1.
Daddy, can I go, please? You're the king.
Say it again.
Oh, you're the fucking king. Yes.
You're the king, Alan.
AKA the king of verbal seduction. You know, it's the tone of your voice, how seductive your intonations are, the vibrations that you could just reach out over the phone lines and stroke a woman's breast just by the sound of your voice, how you could make her pussy so wet just by the sound of your voice. That's actually very hot.
So you said my show was what?
I said your show is powerful.
Oh, say it again.
Your show is powerful.
I bet the king would fuck me really good.
Who's the king?
Alan Roger Currie.
Oh, yeah. Who's the king?
Alan Roger Currie. The king.
The king.
The king.
I have to agree with you on the communication piece, because I actually did take a session with Alan Roger Currie, and he gave me a line that I did not think was going to work, and it worked. And I was like, what the fuck?
Oh my God!
Currie guys, man, he's the master. He's the master of the verbal seduction. He got that communication piece down pat.
It really worked. It just simply worked, and I just didn't think it was going to work at all.
Some guys have natural handles. Some guys have a better natural shot, but you can always improve your shot. And sex is damn sure something you can fucking learn. Look, dude, you want to learn how to talk better? I'm hiring Alan Roger Currie to get my dirty talk game on, because it's always been something I want to get better at.
Verbal seduction, man. I'm like, clearly, this guy's the Michael Jordan of seduction. Like, you know, come on now.